The helmet hit the old man's shoulder so hard that no one had even heard the motorcycles yet. He cried out and fell sideways onto the concrete. His coins spilled from his cup and scattered on the ground. The sound of gravel flying and the engines roaring came next. 3 motorcycles zoomed into view, moving fast and loud like a buzzsaw cutting through the quiet evening. They stopped right outside a small roadside diner, kicking up dust and making the chrome on their bikes shine in the last bit of sunlight. The leader of the group laughed loudly. "You're blocking the view, Grandpa." One of the riders used his boot to push the old man's backpack aside. The third rider slowly kicked over the old man's drink, spilling it all over the gravel. The liquid soaked into the ground, but it didn't seem to matter to anyone. Inside the diner, everything went still. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. A waitress froze with a coffee pot still in the air, halfway to a table. People stared, but no one moved. In the back booth, Jason Statham sipped his black coffee. He didn't speak or blink. He just kept watching the scene outside. The leader of the bikers, Brock, unhooked a steel chain from his belt. It hung by his side, making a soft clinking sound like warning bells. He walked toward the old man again. Jason stood up, slowly folded his napkin, and walked toward the door. He stepped outside, his boots crunching on the gravel. The biker, Brock, smirked, not knowing who he was about to face. The roar of the motorcycles had faded, but the damage was done. The old man was still on the ground near the sidewalk, holding his shoulder in pain. His coins were scattered around him in the gravel. The bikes now sat in the parking lot, cooling off. Chrome shined under a half-broken neon sign that flickered weakly. A hot breeze blew through the parking lot, kicking up dust around the tires. Inside the diner, no one said a word. It was the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee and local people quietly ate pancakes. But now, no one was eating or talking. The air was thick with tension. It felt like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Jason Statham sat still in the back booth, his black leather jacket hanging over the seat next to him. His dark jeans were covered with a little bit of road dirt. He held his mug of coffee, but he hadn't touched it. It was just warm black coffee, with no sugar or cream. He hadn't moved his eyes from the window since the bikers took off their helmets. He didn't come to this diner to cause trouble, but trouble had come to him. Outside, the 3 bikers stood by their motorcycles. The leader, Brock, was thick, bald, and built like a truck. He had a skull tattoo crawling up his neck. He was looking for someone to pick on. The second biker, Jax, was jumpy and had a lot of attitude. He paced around, like he was ready to break something. The third biker, Griffin, didn't speak at all. He just looked at you, and you could tell he had done bad things. The bikers hadn't come for food. They came to show off. And right now, the old man Walter was their target. Walter didn't have a last name. He was just Walter, the quiet man who ate leftovers and stayed out of the way. The locals called him Walter and didn't ask questions. He wore a military jacket with old patches on it. He kept to himself, never causing problems. But tonight, that had all changed. Jason Statham has not blinked once since the bikers arrived. He hadn't even taken a sip of his coffee. He just watched the situation outside. He was ready to act if things went bad, and he knew they probably would. Outside, the bikers stood around Walter. Brock, the leader, was holding the chain. The links of the chain made a soft, dangerous clinking sound as he moved it. Brock was looking at Walter with a cruel smile, waiting for Walter to do something. Walter didn't look up. His hands shook as he picked up his backpack. The old fabric of his backpack was torn, and a corner of it was held together with tape. Walter's voice was soft when he said, "I ain't bothering nobody." Brock sneered. "Exactly. That's the problem," he said. At that moment, a styrofoam coffee cup fell and hit the floor with a loud thud. Everyone in the diner gasped, and a fork clinked onto a plate. The silence inside the diner grew heavier. Jason Statham stood up. The sound of the door creaking open was louder than it should have been. Everyone inside the diner turned to look. Jason's boots hit the concrete as he stepped outside. His walk was calm, steady. Every step seemed like it mattered. The air seemed to change around him. He stopped about 5 feet from Brock, with his hands loose at his sides and his shoulders straight. He didn't say a word. Brock slowly turned to look at Jason, his smirk getting even bigger. Well, look who's here. Hollywood royalty, Brock said with a mocking laugh. Jax, the second biker, snickered behind him. Are you going to autograph my bat, movie man? Griffin, the silent one, cracked his knuckles slowly. It sounded like dry branches breaking. Jason's eyes didn't change. He wasn't paying attention to the chain or the bat or even the strong biker in the back. He was only looking at Brock. He was focused. Jason wasn't going to back down. Are you his babysitter or something? Brock asked, pointing to Walter. You know him? Or are you just the kind of guy who can't mind his own business? Jason didn't answer. He just took one slow step closer to Brock. The bikers tensed up. The people inside the diner watched through the glass, silent and wide-eyed. A teenager near the window whispered, "That's him. That's Jason Statham." Someone else muttered, "No way. He's out here." But no one could stop staring. Jason didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He just stood there, like he was ready for anything. He raised his chin slightly, not as a challenge, just as a way of showing he was ready. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff. You didn't need to fall to know it was dangerous. Jack started pacing around behind Jason, trying to circle him. Bet he thinks he's in one of his little movies, Jack said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Bet he thinks he's the hero. Jason didn't say anything. He just shifted his position a little. It was a small move, but it was enough to make the air inside the diner feel colder. The waitress behind the counter stopped breathing. The old man by the window hadn't blinked in 30 seconds. And outside, the chain in Brock's hand stopped swinging. Brock's smile didn't go away, but it changed. It cracked, just a little bit. He started spinning the chain in his hand slowly, letting it swirl around like a snake ready to strike. The links made a soft rattling sound. Brock's voice was low, but it carried. You really think this is your business, movie man? He asked, his voice full of anger. Because I promise you, this ain't one of your pretty little movie sets. The tension in the air was thick. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Would Jason stand his ground? Would the bikers back off, or was this going to be a fight? And the worst part? No one in the diner dared to move. They were all stuck, waiting for the next moment to unfold. Jason Statham was ready to take action, and Brock had no idea what was coming. Jason didn't answer. He blinked once and then slowly stepped forward. The chains stopped moving. Inside the diner, the air seemed to grow heavier. People leaned forward in their seats without even realizing it. A young boy near the window whispered, "Is that really Jason Statham?" His friend quickly shushed him, his eyes wide and his hands gripping the edge of the booth. A woman sitting across the aisle fumbled with her phone, trying to open the camera app without making a sound. The plates on the tables had gone cold. The sound of a neon light flickering above was suddenly very loud. Still, no one said a word. Outside, gravel shifted beneath the boots of the bikers. Brock's sneer returned, looking even uglier now. "Let's teach the action star what it feels like in the real world," he said. He tilted his head quickly. That was the signal. Jax moved right, circling around Jason like a predator, tapping his metal bat against his palm. Griffin moved left, his heavy boots making a crunching sound with each step. The three men formed a triangle around Jason, getting closer and closer. Jason didn't move. His body was still, but his senses were awake, like a superhero getting ready for a fight. He watched them carefully. Jax was twitchy, Griffin was shifting his weight, and Brock had too much confidence. Jason could see everything and think about what was going to happen next. Jax spoke again. "Come on, tough guy. You always this quiet, or is it just when cameras aren't rolling?" Griffin cracked his knuckles slowly. "Just another fake," he said. Jason didn't blink. He didn't move. He was calm, in control. Inside, Walter watched with clenched hands, his face tight with fear. He had seen fights before, in another place, in another time, but he had never seen anyone like Jason. Jax circled even farther around Jason, trying to get behind him. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Are you deaf or just dumb?" Jax yelled. Still, Jason didn't answer. His breathing was steady, his shoulders loose. He was completely calm. Then, Jason nodded once, just a tiny nod, but it was important. Not for them, for himself. The moment he gave himself permission to fight, Brock's eyes narrowed. "All right, let's dance," he sneered. Brock lunged forward, swinging the chain like a whip, aiming straight for Jason's head. Inside the diner, someone gasped. Walter squeezed his eyes shut. A waitress covered her mouth with both hands. A tray of food crashed to the floor. Time seemed to slow down. The diner had been holding its breath, and now it exploded into chaos. The chain rushed through the air, fast and dangerous, but Jason didn't blink. He moved his head just enough to the side, and the chain missed, snapping through empty space. The sound was loud enough to make birds fly away from the nearby power line. Then Jason was moving. Jax flinched. Griffin took a step forward. Brock's grin disappeared. Something had changed, and everyone could feel it. The three men had surrounded Jason, but Jason had just started the fight. The chain missed, and Jason's head moved just enough. It was like he was part of the air, his movement so smooth. He grabbed Brock's wrist, twisted it with a sharp snap, and a sickening crack echoed around the diner. The chain fell to the ground with a loud noise. Brock screamed, but only for half a second. Jax was already charging in. He raised his metal pipe high, aiming for Jason's head. The crowd inside gasped. Jason spun low, and the pipe flew over his head, cutting through empty air. Jason moved fast and smoothly, like he knew exactly what was going to happen. He landed on his feet and drove an elbow into Jax's ribs. It sounded like a tree being split in half. Jax folded in pain, air rushing out of his lungs. He dropped the pipe and stumbled sideways, clutching his chest, gasping for air. Griffin charged forward, quick and strong, like a bulldozer aiming to hit Jason's chest. But Jason didn't fight against him. He stepped aside and grabbed Griffin's jacket collar. Griffin's own speed carried him, and he slammed into the side of the diner. The impact shook the windows. Inside, the silverware on a table jumped. Someone screamed. A waitress dropped a coffee pot, and it shattered on the floor. Outside, Griffin groaned and then collapsed like a heavy bag of sand. Jason took a deep breath, his calmness unchanged. Brock was still on the ground, struggling to get up, his face red and his eyes wild with rage. His voice cracked when he shouted, "You're dead! You hear me?" He charged at Jason, swinging a wild punch with his good arm. Jason didn't move. He didn't blink. He waited, calm as ever. Then Brock swung a desperate hook straight at Jason's head. Jason ducked easily, then rose and punched Brock in the gut. The punch landed like a hammer hitting wood. Brock folded in half, the air rushing out of his lungs in a loud cough. He collapsed face first into the gravel, groaning and twitching slightly before going still. The world went quiet. No music. No talking. No wind. Inside the diner, no one clapped or cheered. They just stared in shock and awe. One man near the front whispered, "That was Jason Statham." Another voice, breathless, added, "He didn't even speak." "Did you see that elbow?" Someone else mumbled, "He took down all three of them." The whispers grew louder. People moved their chairs. Phones were pulled out again, shaking in hands, but the flashes came too late. Most of the action was already over. Jason didn't pose or grin. He just stood there, scanning the scene. Brock was groaning on the ground. Jax was curled up on his side, holding his ribs. Griffin was leaning against the wall, wheezing. Jason turned slightly, and Walter had stepped outside. He stared at the wreckage, then looked up at Jason, his eyes wide. Jason gave him a single nod. Walter returned the nod slowly, like two soldiers recognizing each other in a strange land. Inside the diner, a teen's voice broke the silence. "Dude, I'm posting this right now." Someone laughed, but it was nervous, like they were still trying to understand what had just happened. The people inside stayed behind the glass. No one came out. No one dared. Jason didn't wait for them. He turned and walked toward the diner door. Not a word was spoken. Gravel shifted beneath his boots. Slow, steady, measured steps. When he reached the steps, a man at the counter instinctively moved out of his way, not even realizing why. Jason paused at the threshold and looked back once. Brock was still lying on the ground, not moving. Jason stepped through the door, letting it close softly behind him with a quiet click. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind would last for a long time. Outside, the dust began to settle. The only sound was the groaning of broken pride. Brock shifted on the ground, trying to push himself up on one elbow, but his body wouldn't listen. His breath came in quick, wheezing gasps, his eyes half closed in pain. Griffin hadn't moved. Jax coughed quietly, still curled on his side, holding his ribs. Jason walked past them without saying a word. He kept walking, the steady rhythm of his boots on the gravel echoing like the final beat of a drum. He stopped beside Walter, who hadn't moved. The old man looked up at him, his voice dry as he spoke. "Are you all right?" Jason asked, his voice calm as always. Walter nodded slowly. His hands were still shaking, but he stood up straighter. "I've seen a lot in my life," he whispered, his voice cracking. "But that, I've never seen anything like that." Jason didn't answer with words. He simply reached down, grabbed Walter's arm with a firm but gentle grip, and helped him to his feet. Walter winced but stood taller now, more confident. Inside the diner, the door creaked open. The waitress stepped outside, her hand still over her chest. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Are you really Jason?" she asked. Jason didn't answer. He just gave her a slight nod. He walked past her, calm and casual, and returned to his booth. His coffee was still there, untouched. He placed a folded bill beneath the mug, then turned and walked out the back door. No speech, no smirk, no dramatic stare. Just footsteps fading into the dark, and a silence that followed him like a shadow. Strength isn't about making noise, shouting, or swinging around. Real strength is stillness. It's control, precision, restraint. It's knowing you can fight, but choosing when to act. Brock sat in the gravel long after the crowd had gone. He didn't speak. He didn't shout. His fingers dug into the dirt, like he was trying to hold on to something, anything. His mouth moved as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out, because silence had spoken louder than any threat. Jason didn't fight to show off. He fought because someone needed to be protected. And he didn't gloat, because that's not how real men finish things. If you liked this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling adventures, mysteries, and unforgettable moments. Your support keeps these stories alive and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching. I can't wait to see you in the next video.